and welcome to the 411 show. My name is Fabiola Torralba and I am 21 years old. This show is run by youth, hosted by youth, and aimed to inform youth. We will give our perspectives as true as we know it. This show will be a special presentation focusing on war and political violence. We will speak and hear commentary from American citizens who have lost loved ones in war and or political violence. This show will be in several segments. This is part 1. Our two guests today are Mr. and Ms. Corrie. If you could just introduce yourself first, please.
I'm Cindy Corrie.
And I'm Craig Corrie.
Now Cindy and Craig Corrie speak about their daughter's legacy and speak out against political violence.
Hi.
If you can just tell us a little bit about your background, what kind of work you had been doing prior to your daughter's going to Palestine, and where you lived and how long you lived there.
We are from Olympia, Washington, and we moved there in 1975. Craig and I both are from Iowa originally, but we have lived in Olympia since 1975 mostly, and our children were all raised there. I was trained as a music educator, and I spent time making a lot of music. I'm a flutist and a singer, but also working in schools, doing a lot of volunteer work, and also taught parent education for several years in a community college.
Well, I'm from, of course, lived in Olympia, Washington. I was a life insurance actuary before Rachel was killed. And actually we were living in Charlotte, North Carolina when Rachel was killed.
And if you can tell us a little bit about why Rachel wanted to go to Palestine?
After 9/11, Rachel really stopped, I think, along with a lot of Americans, and tried to look at why that tragedy had occurred. And that led her to the issue of Israel and Palestine as being a root cause of a lot of anger in the Middle East and in the whole world towards the U.S. and certainly towards Israel as well. And she began studying that issue. She was connected to people in our community in Olympia who had direct connections to it. One was an Israeli woman who had lived for 29 years in Israel, whose family had survived the Holocaust. She had been in the Israeli military, but she had seen and come to know what was happening with the now almost 40-year occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, and she'd become a very strong voice opposing that occupation. She was on the campus at the Evergreen State College where Rachel was studying. There were also others in our community who had been to the West Bank and Gaza in the 80s, in the 90s, and had come back and continued their work on this issue, so Rachel was learning from them. And then she really embarked on her own learning about it through doing a lot of reading. She picked out documentary films when I would be home that she would want to watch, that we would watch together. So she was educating herself as well as us. And then in 2002, some of her friends from the Evergreen State College went to the West Bank and went to Gaza as part of the International Solidarity Movement. It was a group that was joining Palestinians in a Palestinian-led non-resistant movement to the occupation. And Rachel heard about the work that they were doing. She heard the stories. She, I know, was looking for something meaningful, a meaningful way to respond to all that she was learning. And so going with the ISM to the West Bank and Gaza became that avenue for her.
And what was your reaction when your daughter decided to go to Palestine?
Well, when Rachel decided to go to Palestine, I think she was making up her mind over a period of time, and we weren't living where she was living, so we were on the other coast. I think like most young women that age, she probably started to break it to her parents long after she had decided to go to Palestine. So I was afraid for Rachel. I had the experience of being in the Army in Vietnam, and while I know that the U.S. Army did some really horrible things in Vietnam, I wasn't a part of that. So I think that when I heard Rachel was going to go, I was worried about Rachel's safety from the Israeli military, but I also thought of a young woman who is was tall but fairly light and could be arrested if she was doing something that the Israeli military didn't like. It was after Rachel got there that I started to hear her reports from Rafah and realized that when she was talking about bullet holes around the windows of houses that had children in them, when she was talking about people shooting at her feet, that spoke to me of a military that was largely out of control, and that's when I got very frightened about Rachel being there, and I realized she was unlikely to be arrested, that just more than some sort of mistake. That because of the lack of control on the military there, Rachel was in far more danger than I would have first thought.
And how did you get the news about your daughter's death?
It was a Sunday, March 16th. Craig and I were in our apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had been away in Washington, D.C. the week before at an anti-war march, Code Pink March on the White House because of the upcoming Iraq war. So we were just trying to pull together our apartment. I mean, things were kind of messy. We were cleaning up. Craig was off doing the laundry. And then a phone call came. It was my son-in-law who was in Olympia, Washington at the time. He and my daughter Sarah were living in our house in Olympia, and they had just sat down to have their coffee and breakfast. When Callie called me, he asked to speak to Craig, and I thought there was something in the tone of his voice that let me know that this was a serious phone call. And I asked him why. Craig was off doing our laundry, and I said that Craig wasn't there. And he said, well, we've had some very sad news. And then I could hear my daughter Sarah crying in the background, and she said that it was Rachel. And I remember asking immediately, is she dead? So I think, I guess the possibility of something like that happening was always present for me while she was there. Callie and Sarah had been eating their breakfast. The phone rang. It was a neighbor and an old friend who said in the message machine that they just let run, she said, I am so sorry. I've just heard about the tragedy on television. And Sarah thought for a minute, what tragedy and what could it be? And then she thought, if it's on television, it must be Rachel. They went to the TV and turned it on, and on the station that was there at the moment, running across the bottom of the screen were the words, Olympia woman killed in the Gaza Strip. And that's the point at which they called us. Sarah realized that if we hadn't communicated with her, that we probably didn't have the news either. And then while Sarah was crying in the phone to me, her husband went back to the television set, came back, and told us that now it was saying across the bottom of the screen, Rachel Corrie of Olympia, Washington, killed in the Gaza Strip.